Hello friends, today we're going to make a pamphlet book, and you will find that this really simple structure is really useful because you can use it on its own to create a whole bunch of books because it's such a simple structure, or you can use it in conjunction with other forms. So we are going to be doing both, but of course we're going to start at the beginning, which is to make our pamphlet book. So let's look at our supplies. We have this little strip of paper, which is going to be a jig. A jig is a handmade measuring tool. So basically this is going to tell us where the stations or the holes are going to go on our cover and our pages. This is a pamphlet book. So it is a one signature or one section book. You can see it's just one section of pages that have been gathered together and folded over and then sewn directly onto the cover. There are variations you can do with this. You could have the cover slide on and off and just have the pages bound together, but we are going to be sewing our pamphlet onto the cover itself. So here we are. You should have in your bundle a nice piece of heavyweight decorative paper, and this is going to be our cover. It's been folded in half simply to get it into the envelope, so you might want to look at it and kind of smush it down with your bone folder so that it's nice and crisp on the edge. You have some paper, right? So we're going to take 5 sheets, and I'm sure you have more than that, and that's fine because you can use that for another project, or if you want to do this again on your own, you can. So this is photocopy paper that has been cut in half. So this is 8 1/4, excuse me, no, 5 1/2, because this would have been the piece of paper that it was cut. So it's going to be 5 1/2 by 8 1/2. So 8 1/2, 5 1/2. All right, so if we fold this in half, we are going to get a book, which is half of that. So what is that? So this is 5 1/2 by 4 1/4. So that's going to be the size of our book. Our cover is bigger than that. It is the same height, right? But it's a little bit longer because what we're going to do is we're going to have turn-ins on the edges. Turn-ins are basically where you turn in the heavy piece of paper. You can glue that down so you don't see this, or you can glue the first page down underneath it if that looks nicer to you, or you can leave it like I have, just free and open. The reason we have this turn down here is simply because of the structure of the book itself and to think about its durability. We want this cover to last, and if it's not doubled up, well, then that could be a problem. It could rip over time because this is the part of the book that's going to get the most stress. All right, so I just folded a piece of paper in half. I'm going to fold another piece of paper in half and adjust this just a wee bit. Okay, I think that's a little bit better. All right, here we are. I'm going to fold this in half, and what I like to do is to take the corners together like so, right? And then take my bone folder and smash it in the middle and then go whoop, whoop, like that, so that it's nice and crisp. There is nothing particularly wrong with doing it by hand, like so, right? But I do subscribe to this business of smushing it in the middle and then going out from the sides. I think that gives you a much more even fold. Now there are 2 schools here. There is the one school that believes that you should fold all of your pages individually. And I more or less subscribe to that school. However, when you have cheap paper like this and you're doing a workshop demonstration and you're making a dummy, you could conceivably fold everything in half at once. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sheets of paper. I'm going to fold them together at once. I'm going to jog the pages together, and then I'm going to bring these together like so. Now, you will notice perhaps that you have this kind of stair-stepping effect of the paper itself. That is because as the paper stacks within itself, right, there is the thickness of the paper that we have to think about. So this is a little bit poking out more because of the thickness of the paper, as is this. as is this, etc., right? So when we look at the edge here, while the top and bottom might be uniform, the side is not. And this is perfectly normal. This is a byproduct of putting your pages together in your signatures and not using a guillotine. A guillotine is exactly what it sounds like. It is a tool that a lot of artists have if they're making artist books. And basically it goes and it cuts the edge of the paper off. So when you have books that you buy, commercial books that you buy, they have a rough side like this when they're made. And then after all of the book block is put together, they're put into the guillotine, which trims the edge so that everything's straight. We do not have a guillotine. So you are going to have to learn to love this look. And actually, it's not a bad look. And if you look at some old books, you will find that a lot of old books are not trimmed like this. Okay, so it's not a bad thing, but the reason that it's not trimmed is because we don't have a guillotine, right? There we are. Okay, so I did all of those together. That's one grouping of pages. It's also called a signature, okay? So a signature is a section of pages that are bound together. I'm gonna make another signature with the loose pages just for good measure. Now, the reason people like to do these individually as opposed to all at once is because it can be a little more accurate. In this situation, I'm not sure if that accuracy is that big of a deal, but when you're making your lovely, beautiful books that are final, exquisite pieces of artwork, you might want to keep in mind that the accuracy is better when you do the pages individually than this. Okay, so what do we have now? We have our book cover. And remember, I told you that it's a little longer than it should be, but it should be the same height, right? Now we're going to deal with our jig. Our jig is going to tell us where we're going to put all of the holes that we're going to sew into. So let me open this up and show you what I'm talking about. This is our sewing pattern, and it's been made with 3 holes. 1, 2, 3. They are equally spaced. Now, as an artist, you can decide not to equally space things. That's perfectly fine, but you know, you have to do it for a reason. So the reason might be aesthetic. It might be something that has some part of the conception of the book, you know, what it means, it aids that. But if none of that is true, there's no reason to not just do it like this. As you know from listening to my last video, I'm not a big fan of doing a lot of measuring. So I do know that this is cut, or it should be cut, approximately the same size as this, right? Okay, so if I want to find the middle of that, all I have to do is take my jig and fold it over, whoop, and I found the middle, no problem. I'm going to mark that so that you can see it better, okay? Now, to find the middle of these 2 sides, all I have to do is fold them in half, so that's what I'm going to do. Fold this in half. And there we go. Equally spaced, no measuring with a ruler. Okay, there we go. So now I know that I've got 1, 2, 3 equally spaced spots that I can put my holes. I also like to make little tiny notches, which you may or may not want to do. So the notches look like itty bitty little slices of pie, right? And I'll show you what I'm talking about. I was watching my last video briefly, and I noticed myself cutting, and I know it's a bit disturbing. I felt disturbed, but I can't help it, because I cut in a strange way. Okay, little notches. Chomp. So I don't know how well you can see these little notches, right? But they're there. Now, 2 different ways I can go with putting these holes in. All right, I'm going to recommend to you that you bring your book, well, you open your book, okay? So you open the pages of your book, and that you slide this in the middle, right? And what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're always putting this in the same way. So I like to mark this. This is the top, which you could mark with a T, but I've marked it with an H because that means head. This is foot. So that's just a different way of thinking of top and bottom. You can write top and bottom, T and B if you want. It doesn't matter. Whatever helps you remember which is the top and which is the bottom. The reason that you care about this is because your measuring here might be slightly, and I mean slightly, different. So if you flip it the other way when you're doing your cover, it could be that these pages are not going to line up. If you have pages that are thick, you do not have the option that I have, and I hope that I have, of simply doing all of them at the same time, right? Because you're not going to be able to get your all through all of those pages in a nice, clean fashion. So it's equally as essential that you know what the top and the bottom is, or the head and the foot is, so that you can do each page uniformly, all right? All right. So you do not have a cradle at home unless you've made one. And I'm going to show you mine in a minute because I'm going to do this bundle of pages, and then where's my other bundle of pages? Here it is. I'm going to do this bundle of pages. So I'm going to do this one by hand and the other one in the cradle. If you want to make your own cradle, they are so easy to make if you have some pieces of wood around and a way to cut them. That's the ticket. The cutting is the problem. So if you want to make sure this doesn't move around, sometimes I will clip it with a bull clip, which I know I put in your boxes, but I'm not finding mine right now. So I have a clothespin hanging around, so I'm going to just put that at the top of this so that my pages don't move around, and so that this doesn't move around while I am poking the holes into the surface. So it's important that everything's straight. I'm putting this more or less on one side. I'm opening it up like this so that I can cut, or rather poke, on the line, the crease. That's what I want to do. I don't want it to go a little bit over here or a little bit over here. It has to go straight through that fold mark. So poke, 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 right? And I want to make sure that it's gone all the way through, all right? I need to make the hole large enough for my needle to get through it at least twice, all right? So this one I'm going to make a little bit bigger. Okay, so that's done. Let me show you this move in a cradle. So here's my cradle. Bear with me for a moment. My cradle is this tool, and I'm going to move this so that you can see it better. Boop. Right? It's this kind of very primitive looking tool. All it is a board here, and a board here, and then a board here. And boy, it looks dusty because it's been in my studio. So what I'm going to do now, and I'm going to hold this so you can see what I'm up to. I'm going to put my pages in here, right? And because there's this stop here, I can jog my pages right up against that. Now, I'm going to put this inside my pages. This is always the head here, okay? So this is the headboard. I'm going to put that there. And with my awl, I'm just going to push straight down. Push, 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 and there we go. Okay, it's easier than doing it by hand. So if you want to make this tool for yourself, you will use it again and again and again. Otherwise, this is perfectly fine for our needs. If you want to go into the print shop and use the cradles that are there, use the print shop, please do. That red cabinet is there, chock full of stuff for you to use. All right, whoop, let me pull these out and get rid of this cradle because should I use it for this? I think I will because it's easier. Okay, so here's my cover. I'll do it to 2 because I've got an extra cover here. I'm going to put this down in here. I could do my holes according to what I have already in this signature because it's just one, so I don't really have to worry about being multiple. Or probably better is to use my jig. I'm going to use this. I know I just said it was better, but I know for a fact this is going to be correct because I'm basing it on the holes that have already been created. So I just poked a hole through to the back side of my cover. Hopefully you can see that okay. So I did that with my cradle, and then I'm going to do it with this. And incidentally, I'm gonna do the sewing twice. I know you can back up the video, right? But I'll do it twice. Anyway, I'm nothing if not thorough, my friends. All right, so now I'm just gonna use my jig. I'm gonna hold it in place with my bull clip or my clothespin. And I'm gonna do exactly the same thing I did before. I'm gonna hold it up a little bit and poke holes in. I don't want my holes to be giant, right? Because giant is gonna mean that it's not gonna work, well, it's gonna scoot around a little bit. We don't want that. Now your thread has been waxed, and that means that it is coated with wax. You can buy wax, or you can actually use just a candle if you have one sitting around to wax your thread if you have thread that is unwaxed. I have thread here, this yellow thread, this is unwaxed, and you can see it has kind of a drier sort of look to it than the stuff that you have. Let's wind that up, that side. And then I have this, which is waxed. I don't know if you can tell the difference, but the waxing is there so that this doesn't get tangled up as easily, and that's the only reason it's there. I think I probably should use the yellow so you can see it better. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do a super tricky secret move with my needle. So you should have a couple of large needles like this. This is, in my case, this is a tapestry needle. It's a large needle with a large hole. So that's good because I need it to accommodate this thread. Sometimes I bite the end of the thread, which you didn't see because my mouth is off camera, but maybe you can see it here. I don't know. I bit the end of the thread so that it would flatten out a little bit. If you have a hard time getting your thread through the needle, that might be something that you need to do, just to flatten it out to make sure it goes through. It just went through. And the secret super move that I'm gonna do, this is useful because you're never gonna create a knot like you do in regular sewing. The knot is gonna make things difficult because you're gonna be tying off the thread at the very end. So you don't want a knot as a stop for when you're threading, or when you're sewing, I should say. So this is a nice move in most instances, not all, but most instances. So see my needle, right? Now I'm gonna take my needle, and there's a little bit of a tail here. This tail should be, oh, I don't know, maybe mine is probably about 10 inches, anywhere from, I don't know, 3 to 6 or 8 or 10, whatever inches is fine because you can always trim it. You just want to make sure that you have enough of this that it's comfortable for you to do this next move. So my next move is I'm going to take my needle and I'm going to stab it right into my thread. Now this is a little tricky, but basically what I'm doing is I'm sewing into the thread. So we're looking at the needle tip there and it's in the thread, or that's at least what I'm trying to do. So I'm gonna pull this thread down, 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 all the way over the eye of the needle. Yoink, right? And so now it's got this sort of thing going on. So this is not a knot. This is my thread being joined together because it's been threaded through or sewn through. My next move is this. I'm gonna pull on this long part, whoop, until it stops. See that? And now it won't move, but it doesn't, there's no knot here. So my needle isn't gonna come off the thread while I'm sewing, but it doesn't have a knot either. So I'm doing a single thread for this sewing, and usually the way we figure out how long something should be is by the height of the book itself. In this case, I think it's good just to be generous and to sew about the length of your hand to your elbow. Something like that is a good length for this kind of book. But the height of the book, we would see how long the book is, right? Or rather how high the book is. And for each signature, we'd add one length of thread. Now in this case, that's gonna get awkward for us, so that, having more thread is better than having less thread, most definitely. So what am I saying here? The bottom line is, I'd say about 14 inches is good for you, maybe a little bit more than that. That's perfectly fine, okay? You're gonna end up trimming this afterwards anyway. My first move is this. I wanna jog these together so that all of my holes are lined up. If I don't want this to move, I can take my clothespin or my bull clip, just clip it on the side so it's out of the way, right? But holding this in place. You can do that, or you can just hold on to it. I'm gonna sew through the middle first. Now, if you want your tie to be on the inside, like mine, in this example, you're gonna start sewing on the inside, because wherever you start is where you're gonna finish, all right? If instead you want the tie to be on the outside, that's where you're gonna start. So I'm gonna do mine on the inside. And here we go. So I'm gonna poke straight through, right? And I'm gonna leave about a tail of something comfortable for me to tie. So what would this be? Maybe 3-4 inches, something like that, okay? Now I'm on the outside of the book and I'm gonna jump over here. And if you feel like your needle and your stations here, stations with the holes, are not quite lining up, like this is sort of over. I don't like what happened there. So I'm gonna just be very careful now to make sure that this is all lining up. I'll do better on the next book. So I'm pulling that. I don't wanna pull this out, but I do want this to be tight. So this is just a link stitch here. So I'm just popping on over to the next spot. Now, I'm gonna jump all the way over here and go through that. And again, I'm gonna lift my pages to make sure all this stuff is lined up. I wonder if I switched it. I might have done that. Meaning, I might be out of order in terms of the head and the foot. So I've got this big stitch in the middle now. Now I'm gonna go right back through that center hole, right? And what I wanna do is pull this gently, tightly, okay? So this is tight, but not pulling the pages so that they rip. I want my thread to be on opposite sides of this thread here. So this is on this side, this is on that side, and now I'm simply going to tie a knot, yoink, and then for good measure, I'm gonna tie it again, yoink. All right, I can trim it. If you're doing something on the outside and you've got some kind of decorative binding material, you could tie a little bow and be sweet like that. Okay, so this is what I've got now. Now I need to do my turn-ins, right? So again, I'm not a fan of doing a lot of measuring. You could measure, but I like to do this by eye. So what I'm gonna be doing, I'm gonna close the book, make sure everything's the way I want it to be. And if you wanted to, you could trim this on the paper cutter, provided that this is a thin book and you're very careful. One of the troubles of trying to trim something on the paper cutter is that you end up doing it again and again and again because it's not a clean cut, all right? So if this bothers you, right, you could trim that. You could trim it with your X-Acto knife, you could trim it with the paper cutter, or you could just leave it, right? Because this is a dummy book and this is a workshop and you don't really need to get that fussy. All right, so I'm closing this up, making sure everything's doing what it should. And then see how this is closed. I'm gonna take this edge here of the pages and I'm just using a ruler just so I have that edge, right? That's not gonna scoot around. And I'm gonna score the book. I'm making this book so that there's no overhang around the pages themselves. I'm gonna fold this in. I'm gonna use my bone folder to make sure that it's nice and crisp. I close the book again. So that's good, right? So when I have this book closed, my pages aren't gonna hang over. Now I have my pages closed, I have everything closed. I'm gonna do the same thing on the other side. Now, I'm closing my book. This is kind of important. When I open this, the pages move, all right? So I want this to be exact, right? As exact as I can get it. So I'm gonna close the book to do this other side. Remember on the other one, the book was open. I'll do this again so you can see it. So I just scored that. I'm gonna fold that over. And there we are. Now it lined up perfectly, okay? So that's a nice thing. What can I do now? Well, it's done. I could glue this down if I thought that looked nice. I could glue this down if I didn't want to flop it around, or I can just leave it as is. And I think for this one, I'm gonna leave it as is. What is a pamphlet book good for? A pamphlet book is an excellent thing on its own if you want to make something in mass production. So in other words, let's say you had a project, maybe that text-only project that we have coming up, where you wanted to make a bunch of these books so you could distribute them easily to people, right? So you can hand this out, or maybe you're secreting them into library books or something like that, so that when somebody takes out a library book, they find that they've got this little secret message that you've left for them in your pamphlet book. So this is particularly good if you want to make a whole bunch of identical books that are going to be distributed. All right? Okay, let's make this one again. So we have this together, right? I want to make sure my holes are lining up, that I didn't mess up and flip it, which is what I think I did with the other one. So they are lining up, that's what I'm looking at right now. So I'm going to hold it in place with my good old clothespin or a bowl clip, and let's see, where is my needle? Here it is. All right, I bet I can get away with not doing this again, but I'm going to, because I want to show you what I did again, because sometimes seeing something twice is better than seeing it once. All right, so we decided that this needs to be about 14 inches or so. Something, you know, it's off camera, but I usually just judge it by stretching it out and not letting the thread go past my elbow. Now that's really rough. That one's gonna be hard for me to put through the eye of the needle. So maybe I will just cut it with something that does a better job than my scissors. Okay, so I'm threading this, right? And I'm gonna leave a little bit excess here, and I'm going to stab the needle into the thread. Oh, it's not so easy. Okay, there we go. Mine is kind of crappy, but okay, I think it's gonna work. So there it is. The needle is going through my thread. I'm gonna pull this down so that it goes over the eye of the needle. So what am I pulling down? Pulling down the short end. Yoink. Up, see mine, rats. I'll do this again. I hadn't really, it was holding on literally by a little tiny itty bitty fiber. So let me, oh, that's not much better. Bear with me, friends. Bear with me. I have middle-aged eyes. Okay, now I just sewed through it. That one's better, right? Because it's more in the middle of this piece of thread. So I'm gonna pull this down, dun, 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 doink, so that's over, and I'm gonna pull it all the way down, right? Now, do you see how that is? Now, I'm gonna pull the long end, gently. I'm not crazy, you know, fast about this. This isn't a race, until it stops, and there we are. I have this ready to sew with, all right? So back to my pamphlet. So again, I'm gonna start by going through the middle, and I'm going to be wise about sewing. I created my own hole or station last time. I didn't mean to. That's not an ideal thing to do because I already had a hole punched for that, and it was not good. So I'm gonna pull this through, okay? Or maybe I'll do it on the outside now because I did it the other way before. So I'm starting on the outside of the book. I'm gonna pull this through. I'm gonna leave a little bit excess that's comfortable for me to tie, all right? I'm on the inside of the book now, so I'm gonna make one stitch. It doesn't matter if I go up or down, doesn't matter. So again, poke that through. Good, it went easily into the correct station. When I use the word station, it's the hole that the thread is going through, okay? So this is the station. This will come more in handy in terms of using this terminology when you have to do some complicated sewing and I have to say station 1, station 2, station 3. At this point, it's probably more confusing for us to refer to those things. So we are just gonna call this a station because that's what it is. Okay, I want this to be tight, but I don't want it to be so tight that it rips the pages. Now I'm gonna leap over here. Now some people like to go right back in the middle and do this whole move over again. And there's no difference. I mean, you know, it's just a different pattern of sewing, but they're both gonna do the same job. So you know what, I'll do that. I'll go back into the middle here. One of the reasons it's not my favorite way of doing it is simply because the needle has to go through this hole 3 times, which isn't a bad thing, but just means your hole's a little bit bigger. Okay, so I'm in the middle now. See what I've done here? And now I'm sewing through here. I could do that easily. My station's lined up, so that was good. Uh-oh, that got a little loose. Don't worry. Don't worry, you can pull it tighter, which is what I'm gonna do. Okay, so now I'm here on the outside. All right, you can see that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew under this, okay? So that this is now in the middle. So let me repeat that move so you can see what I did. That's the little excess there. This is the middle station. I'm going to sew under this. Now again, if this gets loose on you, you can tighten it up. So essentially what's happening here, I'm going to move this to the other side because it's tighter when you do that. And I'm going to tie a knot. I think this is more difficult than the first way I showed you, okay? So doesn't matter how you do it as long as it gets the job done, right? I'm knotting that twice. I could make a little decorative bow, but in this situation, my thread is so skinny, it's not gonna be anything but silly looking. So I'm just gonna cut this. Wow, my scissors are bad. Okay, so there we are. Maybe these scissors are better, let me see. I just hate this raggedy cut. Ah, these scissors are better. Good, all right. So that's pretty small, but my knot is tight, and this is now held together. I'm gonna do the exact same thing with the fold over. So the first fold over, I'm opening my book, I'm letting, well actually I'm gonna put my pages all on one side, right? And I'm gonna use this edge to create my crease. I like using a ruler simply because the pages can move around on you, and having a ruler is a stronger sort of thing to push up against. So I'm going to make a crease, right, with my bone folder. Now I'm going to fold this over. I'm going to use my bone folder, whoop, whoop, to make it nice and crisp. Now I'm closing the book. The book is closed, and I'm going to create my next crease with the overhang. I went right into it without using my ruler, that's fine. And I'm going to open my book again. I'm going to fold this in. And now, very easily, I have made two pamphlets. And that is all I'm going to show you for this moment. But putting these pamphlets together with accordions, that's our next bit of trouble. Okay, so that's our next thing that we're going to use to continue on this idea of making a pamphlet book with other things. So we're going to make hybrids. All right, so that's our next video. I look forward to seeing you then. So stay tuned.